What is going on, y'all? It is KM Best here, your favorite 69th ranked Marvel snapper in the world, and I am here to talk about the upcoming cards in Marvel Snap. Now, it is no secret that the past few months have been a bit of a rocky time in terms of balance when releasing new cards, but hopefully we'll get some powerful cards that aren't too over the top in this next month. First up is the Season Pass card, and that is Miss Marvel. Kamala Khan has made it to the Marvel Snap universe just in time for the release of The Marvels, which is a movie that she is going to be in, and her ability is legitimately very, very powerful. As a 4-cost 5-power card with the ability to add 5 power to the lanes adjacent to her, that is extremely powerful. However, I do think that there are some weaknesses to this ability that make this, a great season pass card, but one that is very clearly, to me, not on the level of Loki or Elsa Bloodstone. Reason number one is that she very much has to go in the middle location if you want to get the most out of her ability. Obviously, 4 energy for 15 power is incredible. However, going in the middle location all the time is not always possible. For example, if there is in the middle location one of the locations that restricts your ability to play cards there, or perhaps turns off ongoing abilities, that can be a downside. In addition, the fact that she is an ongoing card is, I will say, not good. It's kind of hard for one of your main win conditions to be an ongoing card. It's a lot harder when that card always goes in a specific location. So at least with the Devil Dinosaur, you're not super overly worried about Enchantress and Rogue because you can play it in various spots, but they kind of know where you're going to play Miss Marvel. And that means stuff like Enchantress and Rogue without priority are going to be extremely powerful if you're counting on her. And it should be pretty easy to understand where the appropriate locations to play this card are, because it'll be the ones where her effect will actually work. Now, let's move on to the second issue I see with this card, and that is that I think it's going to be a decent amount harder to make this effect work than people might think. I don't think people are quite grasping the degree to which it is actually fairly difficult to have all different costed units in your lanes. This is not something that I consider particularly easy. It is something that requires legitimate deck building sacrifices, and that is something that I will say is more or less not true of something like Elsa or Loki, which required some deck building sacrifices, but still mostly let you do what you wanted to do. Now, you're gonna be looking at a very interesting type of deck when you put this together. This is a deck that is going to, say, maybe scam out a Professor X, right? But the deck that wants to scam out a Professor X is Thanos, and Thanos is very often going to have multiple 1-cost cards in the adjacent lanes, so it's oh, does that actually work? Now, one spot where I think she could be interesting, we tried the Spectrum Thanos thing, but you will have to be very judicious with your 1-cost cards in order to make sure that you don't double up on any of the stones in a lane. And I think that sort of goes against how you typically want to play the Spectrum Thanos deck, which is as a Blue Marvel Kazar style of deck, where you're flooding the board early. Now, as far as other shells for this, I tend to want to start with Professor X when thinking about a card like this, because it is so useful to side buff these locations. Now, if she ends up being extremely, extremely powerful, she'll be just the kind of card you run in whatever. But when you look at the type of decks that are around right now, there's a lot of doubling up on the early slots in a deck. And I guess my question is, how easy is it going to be for her to reliably be good? And instinctively, my answer is I think it's a little harder than most people think, but it still might work. So there is still a chance that this is just a generically very strong card that is just whoa, oh my God, the numbers on this card are really good. And even if you don't get it on both locations, you can at least get a 410 out of it. That's very powerful on its own. So I think that's sort of where my head is at with Miss Marvel, where what really will determine her power is just how easy it may or may not be to turn the effect on. I think that it is likely to be pretty difficult, or at least to require some adjustment period early in the season while people are getting used to her. And I think outside of that, if she ever does become a dominant deck, there is a significant worry about cards like Echo, cards like Rogue, cards like Enchantress. If you are very reliant on her, you can very easily be countered. And I think that is a legitimate worry that you have to have. There are more ways to deal with ongoing cards in Marvel Snap than basically any other card type. And because of that, there are so many situations that your opponent can put you in that are very hard to play out of, even if she is a very powerful card. So overall, I think this is exactly what a Season Pass card should be. I am very happy that the Season Pass card does not look like Omega Busted, or at least I'm very happy that the Season Pass card kind of looks like a card that is you can deal with cards that are cheap in Series 1, Series 2, Series 3. I like that. I think that is good for the game. I think this is a good direction for her to go in. She looks very powerful, but also like the kind of card that can be dealt with before she ends up dominating the metagame like Loki without Mobius. Next up is Gladiator, a card who I initially misread upon seeing it. I thought it was something like Dirty Rat from Hearthstone, but he actually pulls from the deck. That said, he is a 3-cost 7 power card, which puts him on the upper end of power for 3 cost. And his ability pulls a card from the deck. I misspoke earlier. I thought he pulled from the hand. My bad. And when pulling from the deck, he then has a contest of strength with the card. If he is stronger, the card dies. If he is weaker, the card stays on the board. And my instinct with this guy is he is a bit of a more interesting Yondu, I think, especially in a world where you can play him alongside a Shang-Chi. I think this card could have legitimate potential just as a 3/7 that fills up spots on your opponent's board in the downside case, and in the upside case, it is just a 3/7. And I honestly think that when you build around this guy, you're going to want to do so in a deck that wants to clog your opponent's board and then answer them. I think that is a particularly compelling way to do it. I also like that they made another 3/7 with a significant potential downside that isn't mitigated by playing it on turn 6. When you look at a card like Maximus, Maximus almost never sees play outside of being played on turn 6 because that's how you mitigate his downside. I like that they're exploring big downside type guys in this space. So I do think this is an interesting one to do. Gladiator, when I first read him, I thought, as has been previously alluded to, he pulled a card from the hand. And I will say, if he pulled a card from the hand, he would be absolutely busted. Just an unbelievable combo breaker type guy. Insane card if he pulled from hand. Pulling from deck is not very good. It needs to have some specific context where it makes sense to do this. So pulling from your opponent's deck, most of the time, let's say you have, 6 cards in your opponent's deck, there are 2 that are really good hits, and there are 4 that are just I don't really care, right? If you do that, you have a 33% chance to hit one of the ones that's a really good hit, and then you have a 66% chance to hit one of the ones that's bad and draw your opponent closer to the card that actually beats you. And I find that to be a disconcerting scenario. So I think the situation in which this card would mostly, if not always, be good is you look at the current Loki decks where there's just actually no bad hits. But even then, you run the risk of drawing them closer to the cards that are actually bad for you. I tend to think that something about this card sticks with me in a way that Yondu doesn't, and I can't really put my finger on exactly why, but something about the way this guy works, maybe it's just the big body that he has compared to Yondu. I think we can all agree that a 3/7 Yondu would be better than the 1/2 Yondu, so maybe it's just that, and yes, he is less consistent than Yondu. I'm just saying, when he does work, he's a 3/7 Yondu. And when he doesn't work, he's kind of clogging up your opponent's board to some degree. But of course, when he doesn't work, you're probably not going to be playing him a lot in metagames when he is not advantageous for you. So I would think that if you wanted to build around this card, you would end up doing a junk style deck type thing. And I would think that his power specifically is pretty important in terms of hitting the things you want to hit. And knowing when to play him, knowing when to put him in your deck strikes me as important as well. I think this could be anywhere from like a reasonable tech card that sees legitimate play to totally unplayable if I'm off on this. But I'm interested to see what this guy actually does, because I think that there is a very decent chance that he ends up just, it's like one of those cards that nobody really cares about. But I'm interested to explore that until we can actually make that judgment. 3/7 is really good. Killing something out of your opponent's deck, that doesn't really matter. But there are games when it can matter. I do think, generally speaking, the value of information is overstated in Marvel Snap, but I'm interested to see where this guy goes. My gut says he's not going to be particularly good, but I hope my gut is wrong and there manages to be a metagame where he actually makes a lot of sense. I really, really do hope that. Oh, also, can we talk about how it looks like someone like photoshopped the Giga Chad face onto Superman? Like, what were they doing when they designed this guy? I desperately want to know what the process was for that. Like, I have never seen a guy whose face looks more photoshopped on than that guy. I did a double take. I was like, why is the Giga Chad guy in the Marvel Snap now? This guy's really, really sick. When you think about a card like Annihilus, typically I would imagine that when you design this card, you design him with a potential downside, which is that when he doesn't send stuff over, when your opponents are able to fill up lanes, he ends up being very bad. That's how I would have designed him. However, they put in a failsafe to that. And honestly, this card reminds me a lot of Mobius M. Mobius, where it's like, okay, this card has 2 lines of text, and if it had 1 line of text, it would be like pretty good and people would build around it. But since it has 2 lines of text, it's deeply, deeply terrifying. And the second line of text, destroy those that can't, is so freaking scary, man. I don't know what this guy does, but like, oh my God, it turns a sentry into a 420, blaze it. And that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. And it just gets rid of the downside of Sentry no matter what, no matter where you play it. Think about all the effort we go to deal with what Sentry does now. People play him with Cosmo. People play him with Professor X to close off the lane the Void goes in. People play him with Carnage. People play him with the Void, with Viper. It's unbelievable the amount of effort that people go to right now. And they're just giving it to you on a 5/7 body that also sends over your other crap, that also blows up your stuff, even if it doesn't send it over. The guy seems insane. Like, I cannot stress this enough. Absolutely awesome. This card seems bonkers to me. Like, I am so shocked that they made it, because why would you make this? Like, why? What possessed them to make junk an archetype that is pushed? I don't understand it. I don't get it. But here's the thing about this guy. He's also the counter to himself. He's like a self-solving problem, because whoever reveals their Annihilus second just absolutely dunks on the other guy, which is even weirder, because then you get in these scenarios where your goal is to lose priority, which you can do because you play the Hood, you get like a Void out there. Your goal is to lose priority, so your Annihilus reveals after their, and like, there is so much that this guy has going on. Like, this is such a ridiculous card. The mirrors seem like they're going to be an absolute fucking like maze to navigate, because it's like, okay, you want to do the throw priority thing, so your Annihilus reveals second. The best way to make your Annihilus reveal second is to play it on turn 6. But if your opponent knows you're going to play the Annihilus on turn 6, they can just fill up their board so that the Annihilus, rather than giving them the negative power, doesn't actually do anything other than blow up your negative power. Like, he's a very telegraphed card, right? Like, that would be what makes him balanced, is that everything that he's going to do is on the board before he does it, right? And I think that's actually very important to note, because Cards like Loki, cards like Elsa, you don't know exactly what they're going to do because the cards that get the payoff are in their hand. When they Loki you, it's like, okay, what'd they get? When they Elsa you, it's like, oh, okay, so we don't know exactly how big that's going to be. We don't know if it's going to be a Kitty. We don't know if it's going to be a Jeff. There's a lot of ambiguity to those cards. But this guy is actually a little more balanced because there is so little ambiguity. It's just what he's going to do is on the board. The hood, avoid, stuff like that. And so I think he is like a card where like the second line of text at first you look at it and you're like, well, that's just nuts. And I do think he's going to be quite powerful, but I don't think he's going to reach the level of pre-nerf Loki or pre-nerf Elsa because fundamentally he's just so much worse at weaponizing ambiguity. And I think this is could be one of those weird cases where a deck ends up a lot worse in Conquest than it does on Ladder. Because on Ladder, you get the scam happening and you're like, ah, ha, ha, I've scammed you. In Conquest, once they know what you're doing, it's like, all right, I think I know how to handle this. Now, it'll require learning some new play patterns, but this is clearly the card I'm most excited about. You could see me laughing through this video. I am very excited to play with this guy. He looks so damn cool. And I think that it is a very, very interesting piece, and I honestly can't wait for it because I think this probably will be the most impactful card this season. Finally, Martyr, who I just don't get. When this card was originally data mined, it was a 2/6, and I was like, okay, I get it. A 2/6 that reverse Captain Marvel tries to lose you the game if it can. No, I get it. That makes sense to me. But a 1/4, it feels like you're not getting enough reward for playing such a terrible card, right? As a 2/6, it's like, all right, this is the strongest number on a 2-drop, right? Right now, I mean, I didn't think it would necessarily see play as a 2/6, but like you zero it or something, right? Like that's a thing, right? You can zero it and just get a 2/6, and like that's not bad. Like a 2/6 is a very good number. And I think that most of the time, a card like this makes more sense the bigger the number on it is, right? The more you want to play it, the bigger the number on it is, or reverse that, right? The bigger the number on it is, the more you want to go out of your way to get it in. At a 1/4, I guess I just don't feel like you're getting enough for what it's doing to you at the end of the game, right? Are you really going to go out of your way for a 1/4? I don't think I would go out of my way for a 1/4, right? Like when you compare her to something like Titania, who is kind of just better at getting zeroed and also a card that you have a little more control over and you can do more with, I just don't understand why she would be a 1/4. I want her to be bigger. Make her like a 3/7. Make her a 2/6 again. Make her just like really big and beefy, and I guess I'm just a little more into it there. At 1/4, I just don't see it. And this is a card that, you know, hopefully, who knows, like maybe they'll change from what is seen in the data mines. I really hope they do, but I just, at 1/4, I just don't see how this card is something you're going to want to be playing, right? I think you'll play it in a deck that always fills up the board, like Zoo, right? A deck where your board is always full, and then, you know, maybe it'll be fine and you're interested in a 1/4, but that's not really a deck right now. I guess the real use case for her is just any deck that fills up the board all the time. But I don't know if she's good enough to justify running her because the upside of a 1/4 is actually just like pretty marginal. 1-cost cards that see play, like you're like, okay, I could play this, or I could play Ant-Man, who is a 1/4 in my deck that fills up the board all the time, that doesn't lose me the game. And it just sort of, yeah, I don't get it. Like, I don't get what they were going for. I get, no, hold on. I get what they were going for. I think it's a cool idea. I don't get why it would be a 1/4. I think this card needs to be a bigger body in order to be an impactful card, and potentially a higher energy cost to compensate for that bigger body. So that's going to be it from me today. As always, thank you so much to everyone who made it this far in the video. I really appreciate it. I have been KM Best. You have been the besties. Thank you so much for watching. As always, remember to like and subscribe It really does help me out a lot. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much again. I hope you're going to enjoy the next season of Marvel Snap. I hope I'm going to enjoy the next season of Marvel Snap. I'm really excited for Annihilus. I'm not as excited for the other cards, but that guy seems super, super dope. Let me know in the comments if you want to see me reviewing other future cards and what you think the timing should be. We have data mined cards out through December, I believe, and I'd be happy to talk about them, but I try to get these videos done a little bit closer to the time frame of the cards actually being released. So that's how I've thought about it. Let me know if you want to see me look at those future cards as well. I still read every comment on my entire channel. Thank you so much. I really appreciate y'all. You be good. I will see you in the next one.